Now, though I mentioned Donald Trump's campaign rhetoric before you Democratic voters get too smug, let me show you this chart from an article that was written in 2018 where the authors conducted an experiment testing the effect of race on white Democratic voters. What they did was they separated white Democratic voters into two different groups, a control and treatment group. The control group received a political ad that was said to be from the Clinton campaign that talked about outreach to independent voters and how the campaign was going to try to convince independent voters to vote for Hillary Clinton. The treatment group was exposed to a piece of campaign literature, allegedly from the Clinton campaign, that looked to reach out to Latino voters. They then measured support for Hillary Clinton amongst both groups. Now, in the control group, support for Hillary Clinton didn't really change that much. However, in the treatment group, those Democratic voters that were exposed to treatment that said that Hillary Clinton was reaching out to Latino voters rather than independent undecided voters, actually went down. Not only did it go down, but it translated into an increase in support for Donald Trump amongst those voters. So the mere mention of race in a piece of campaign literature did have a statistically significant effect on the likelihood of white voters to support Hillary Clinton. So this is something that uh, race, I should say, is something that can impact voters along the entire ideological and partisan spectrum. So let's revisit the questions now that we've reached the end. What role, if any, does race and ethnicity play in our politics? Well, it plays a big role, but the role is both implicit and explicit. Sometimes it is very obvious when race is playing out in our political discourse, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes the disparate impacts of various policies and rhetoric aren't very visible, at least not at first. The saliency of race does ebb and flow depending on the times, but it's almost always baked into our politics, even if you can't see it. Is race and ethnicity predictive of voting patterns? Yes, as it turns out, it is. Why? There are a lot of reasons. History, rhetoric, all of which go into racially polarized political behavior. And politicians respond to voters on social issues, and race is a big hot button social issue right now. Does policy become racialized, and why? Well, short answer is yes. Why? It's because policy is often implemented to enforce majoritarian views, and as of right now, the majoritarian view is synonymous with the white view, and that goes across and cuts across various partisan ideological lines. Right now, Anglo whites are the dominant cultural and political force in American politics. That will change as demographics uh, of the United States change due to birth rates, immigration, aging. But it's difficult to say when and if that will play a role in our politics going forward. So this was very much a short Reader's Digest version of the role race plays in American politics. There are literally books and entire courses that you could take on race in American politics. This was a very brief overview. If you have any questions on anything in this series of lecture videos, please feel free to email me as usual.